Now let's take this full circle. With everything that we just talked about, how does all of this relate to our parent-child relationships? And I know the information that was just shared for some of you is probably very new information, and you'll need time to absorb it to see if it resonates with you. Or, like I mentioned before, maybe it'll trigger something in you that will become your truth. But let's just suppose for now that what was just shared you can accept. And so if you can, then it only is logical that everything that we talked about applies to your children as well. So if you had any doubts about your children not coming in with an agenda and a purpose and a lot of experience, then I hope now, after hearing some of this information, that you realize that your children, you do not have all that control over them as you thought you did. They don't come in with this clean slate. So as much power that you thought you had over their lives, I now hope that you appreciate that you really don't. And you have influence and you have responsibilities to make sure, of their welfare and make sure everything is okay with them. But at the end of the day, you'll soon realize you don't have all that much power. But what you do have is the power to tap into your inner guidance and to see that what your child is teaching you has to be healed within you. So it is truly a sacred contract, and both parties win, no matter what the life situation is, and no matter how much pain and suffering is involved. At the end of the day, you both asked to be together to experience this, and how you experience it will be determined by your level of consciousness and your openness to tap into your inner wisdom, because that's really where all of this is going towards. Now, I am totally convinced that our children have chosen us as parents and vice versa. And the reason why I'm so convinced is because I experienced that agreement, that sacred contract agreement with my son. Let me explain. One day, and then it was late morning, and I went down to the kitchen and I wanted to get myself a glass of water. And there was these beautiful sun rays coming into the kitchen. It was just a nice, warm, beautiful day. And as I was taking my glass and putting it and filling it with water, all of a sudden I got overwhelmed with this unconditional love. I can't even describe it. That's how powerful it was. And I just felt my heart chakra just open. It was burning and it was just opening. And I said, wow, what is this, right? And what happened was that I all of a sudden I was a spirit. I wasn't in my physical body, and it's like I was standing in front of my son's spirit. I could not see him physically, but I felt him. I felt his energy. And at that moment, there was a surge of unconditional love flowing back and forth between him and I. And that moment was the agreement that we would have this lifetime together as mother and son. And the message that I was getting from my son was that I'll teach you forgiveness and non-judgment and trust. And I could just feel that from him, and I was so thrilled. I said, oh, wow, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I felt that I was teaching him responsibility. So we both agreed to this, and this lasted, I would say, maybe 10, 15 seconds, but it's something I'll remember for the rest of my life. It brought tears to my eyes. I was like overwhelmed. This feeling stayed with me for days and days. And then I got this epiphany, and I realized that we have contracts with everyone. And it was all done in a very pure, love in order for that growth that we were talking about to happen. It's just amazing. I can't tell you how beautiful that experience was for me, and how validating it was that it brought purpose to our whole relationship for the past almost 37 years. That's why I'm so convinced that our parent-child relationship is really a very sacred contract, where we're mirroring what the other person needs to learn, and what the other person has chosen to learn and grow from in that lifetime. And now, if you need even more validation, Dr. Wayne Dyer and his neighbor Dee Garnes, just before he passed away, this was his last book. And this book, called Memories of Heaven, is filled with anecdotes of parents sending in their testimonials about how their children recollect their past lives, or even when they were in heaven. And it is just phenomenal what the type of testimonials that are in this book. Let me just give you an example, and I'll read one for you. It says here, when my daughter was about 3 years old, she mentioned in a conversation that she liked it when she was in heaven. I was a little sad that day because she had told me that she wished her daddy was home with us, like other children, but we got divorced when I was a newborn. Then she said, but that's okay, because I knew it would be like this. I asked her what she meant by that, and she answered, Mommy, when I was in heaven, I picked you, and I knew we were going to be alone, so that's okay. Don't worry, Mommy. I love you so much. That was so amazing for me to hear, from Elsie Farnan in Henderson, Nevada. So if I really invite you to look at that book, read the book, because it will really validate a lot of maybe stories that possibly could have happened with your children, and then you just, ignored it because you didn't really realize what was going on. At this point, you probably came to your own conclusion that in order to create or bring harmony to your parent-child relationship, it really needs to be done with an open heart. Now, the only heart you have control over is yours, and you have zero control over your son's heart or your daughter's heart. And so you are the one that basically has the control to have that interaction with your child with an open heart or a closed heart. Now, we're all humans, and don't worry, no judgments are to be made here. But when we do have a closed heart and we do provide guidance with that kind of energy, the chances of it having a positive outcome are not that great. And you probably experienced that already. But when we come from another vantage point, and one of having more of an open heart, then obviously there's a better chance of having a better outcome. But even if the outcome is the same, you'll be more at peace. And that's what your child is going to benefit from, that resonance of vibration, of high-level vibration that will eventually have a positive impact on them, whether you realize it or not. So it's really important to understand that when you see that it's a sacred contract and that your child is there to mirror stuff that you decided to work on in this lifetime, when a critical situation or a tense situation occurs between you and them, then you can either see that as a gift, or you can see that again as a punishment, depending on what level of consciousness you come from. That's basically the bottom line. And if you do see this as a gift, and you do recognize that it's something in you that you need to release and heal, and we'll be talking a lot about that in session 2, how to do that. But for now, just the fact of realizing that this is a gift and it's a mirror about what's going on inside of you is just fantastic to know. How you will react, well, that will depend on where you're at with your connection to your inner self. So I've provided, to bring the point home, I've provided you with an example that I hope will help you better understand what I'm trying to convey here. So let's talk about the energy relationship between, let's say, a mother and a son. I'm close to that, obviously, because I have a son. And let's suppose this is mom's energy that day. And mom is probably having not a terrific day. She had a hard day at work. She comes home and her son, who has that yellow energy, says to her that he didn't pass his math exam. Now, when you mix the mother's energy, who reacts from a closed heart, let's say in this particular situation, and her fears bubble up, the energy between the two will take on its own vibration for that situation. So, you know, the color scheme red and yellow becomes orange. So if the mother is closed off and her fears bubble up and she starts thinking in her mind, oh my God, he hasn't passed his exam, he doesn't study, and the son says to her, I don't care about my math exam. This makes her even angrier, and now she wants to manipulate and control his life by saying you're grounded and what are you going to do with your life, and now she's worried, what is he really going to do with his life, and you know, he won't have a career, he won't be able to support himself, will he stay at home forever, you know, what will people think? Now we kind of lose perspective when in essence it's just a math exam. But we build this up because it's, you know, happening and we're fearful of this, and where all these fears come from, that is another exercise that we'll be doing in the next session. But let's say for now, just to recognize that all of these fears are coming in from a closed heart. And the interaction between the mother and the son, obviously the vibration will be at very dense and very fearful. So the outcome will probably not be a positive one, because the son obviously is going to put his defense there and say, you know, I'm protecting myself from this person and I will do what I want, because basically that soul came to do what it wanted and we don't have control over that. And to be able to recognize that in itself just releases a lot of the burden. So let's say the mother, we change the scenario, same scenario, but the mother's energy has changed. And she feels good, she feels at peace, she feels connected, you know, she meditates a lot, she's, you know, seeing life from a different perspective. And that particular day, she's connected and grounded. She comes home, the son has the same exact energy, one of, you know, I'm the social buff, I don't need to study, I didn't pass my exam, so what, it's not the end of the world type of energy. So the exchange between the two, again, the color scheme blue and yellow, gives you a different type of energy between that, for that particular situation between the mother and son. Now the guidance and the reaction of the mother, she'll probably react to, you know, she may have a knee-jerk reaction in this case and say, oh my God, what am I going to do? You know, he's not, you know, but he's not, you know, taking responsibility of his life, and what can I do as a parent? And then she stops herself and says, oh, no, this is my fears that are bubbling up, has nothing to do with him. And so she turns around and says to him, I love you. I believe in you. I know, even though this is just one math exam, there'll be many other exams in the future, and I know one day you're going to wake up and you're going to realize what I'm seeing now of you, how wonderful you are, how exceptional you are, and how much I love you, and you have so much potential. And I know when you're going to be ready, that potential will come out of you, because that's what you came here to do. Different outcome, as you can imagine. And that kind of interaction, even though it's the same situation, the mother walks away peaceful. And if she needs to work on her fears when she thinks about what her son is mirroring to her, she'll do that off on her own. She doesn't need to involve her son. All she needs to do is thank him for making her become aware even more of the fears that maybe are still lingering inside of her when it comes to her insecurities about her son not passing his exam. Therefore, the guidance that was provided in the first scenario was guidance that was based in fear, as you must have already guessed. And the guidance provided in the second scenario was one based in love. Therefore, the two outcomes are very, very different, very polarized, and there's no judgment to be made on either one of the outcomes. As mentioned, it always depends on your connectivity with your inner soul, inner guidance, and your open heart. It's as simple as that, and I'll always come back to that. If we live our lives with a closed heart and we live a life of fear, and when we live with our hearts open, we have a very, very different experience because we see life as a gift. And when we do see life as a gift, then we take that gift and we grow from it. And that's what can happen to you if you choose to do that. It's a matter of practice and determination, and even if you fall off this horse, you get back on. Now, let me just give you an example, a personal example of me providing guidance to my son with an open heart, but doing it in a very unconscious way at that time. And here's what happened. I was, when my son was 18 years old, I was sitting in the kitchen and he came and sat next to me and he said to me, "Mom, thanks for saving my life." And he says, "If it weren't for you, I'd be dead today." Not meaning that day, but you know, he would already be dead. And I looked at him and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Do you know how many times I would have gone down the wrong road or made the wrong decision and probably wind up in a gutter somewhere if it wasn't for your little voice that kept telling me how much she loved me and how much she believed in me?" And he said that it was like a little light in my head. And so when I was about to make that critical decision, that little light would just appear and I would go the other way. So he says, "I just wanted to thank you about that." So I was very amazed and very touched. But, you know, I always said to him, you know, that I loved him, and I just did that very naturally, and probably because I had tried everything else and nothing else worked. But no, seriously, I did, you know, make that effort all the time. And I remember that during his teenage years when I tried everything else and nothing else worked, but I always came back to the root of my feeling towards him, which was love. And so I hope my personal experience and the example that I just gave you now brings the point home to you how much the responsibility of bringing harmony to your parent-child relationship really rests on your shoulders and no one else's. So you have all that power. God bless you.